demolition. What we have is 4 months plus an additional 24 days needed to place the charges necessary to demolish within its 420 foot by 220 foot footprint, a building 12 stories smaller than WTC 7, which means, of course, that they could not have demolished WTC 7 without a great deal of advanced preparation, which means, of course, that Larry Silverstein and the other leaseholders of WTC 7, the Blackstone Group, Bank of America, Securities, and the General American Acceptance Corporation had to have foreknowledge of the preparation of that demolition. And this, to me, leads right into the heart of the crimes of 9/11/01. It leads to the heart of the financial establishment. It tells us that these people expected to bring down WTC 7 as part of the crimes of that day. That is the only way that the admitted demolition of the building makes sense, as horrific as that connection may be to you. So I think it's incumbent upon us now to examine Peter G. Peterson, the chairman of the board of the Blackstone Group, also at the time of 9/11/01, the chairman of the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the most important bank in that central bank of the United States, and chairman at that time of the Council on Foreign Relations. Peter G. Peterson, in his roles, not only profited from the results of the demolition of WTC 7, and we should briefly enumerate those profits in terms of the insurance payout. By the time of its demolition, there was about $386 million invested in WTC 7. In February of 2002, a court awarded Larry Silverstein and the other leaseholders $861 million, meaning that they made an immediate profit of $475 million by the destruction of that building. But what I want to consider more is the overall gains to the financial establishment of the United States and Europe from 9/11/01. And that means, of course, dealing with the ensuing invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. And here we can briefly look at some facts in terms of the gains and profits that were made by armaments companies. And we see that Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics all increased their Defense Department contracts by magnitudes of over 30% in the 2 years after 9/11/01. We also see that oil corporations, Royal Dutch Shell, ExxonMobil, British Petroleum, Chevron Texaco, increased their profits by fantastic amounts after 9/11/01. We see Royal Dutch Shell going from $4.5 billion to $8.2 billion. We see ExxonMobil almost quadrupling its profits, going from $4.7 billion to $17.2. We see British Petroleum going from $3.4 to $5.9. We see Chevron Texaco going from $1.1 to $3.5. So this enumerates what we knew in general in terms of the oil companies profiting from the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. And we know from the evidence that's been presented to us that the whole pretext, and pretext is an important word to bear in mind because it was used in the Northwoods document in 1962 and so forth. There's been one pretext after another in the United States history over more than 100 years to involve the United States in wars that benefit its financial establishment. And when we look at the entities who control the corporations that make weapons and that sell oil, we see a lot of the same people and the same entities behind those corporations. For instance, in 1972, the Chase Manhattan Bank, of which David Rockefeller was then the chairman, had a 5.2% voting stock of Mobil Oil. It had 4.5% of Atlantic Richfield. In 1993, of the 122 leading corporations in the United States, the Rockefeller family controlled more than 5% of the board membership of those 93 of the 122 top corporations. We're talking about an extreme concentration of power and wealth among a few principals. And those principals, again, show up in very close relationship to the World Trade Center buildings. So I'm going to talk briefly about the Twin Towers and how those towers' destruction were financially advantageous to some of the principles we've been examining today. And we need to look at how obsolescent those towers were at the time of their demolition. And a book by Eric Darden called Divided We Stand puts in a nice nutshell how they stood in the year 2000. Darden writes, "To maintain the Trade Center as Class A office space, commanding top rents, the Port Authority would have to have had spent $800 million rebuilding the electrical, electronic communication, and cooling systems. There was also the aspects of removal of asbestos from the Twin Towers that was urgent by the time of their demolition, and that was estimated to cost $1.2 billion. So we see them as white elephants standing on very valuable real estate in Lower Manhattan. Throughout their history, and their history links intimately with David Rockefeller because he was the main engine behind their construction. He made them go up in Lower Manhattan in his role as chairman of both the Chase Manhattan Bank and the Lower Manhattan Development Association. Despite all kinds of obstacles, he made them go up, and once they were up and no one wanted to rent them, he got tenants through his brother, the governor of New York, Nelson Rockefeller. And at the time of the transfer to Silverstein Properties from the New York Port Authority, it was widely recognized within financial circles that the New York Port Authority, which is a state agency, remained under the control, effectual control of interests dominated by the Rockefeller family, and that is dominated most by David Rockefeller. So we should look briefly also at the terms that were given Silverstein Properties at the time it took over the lease of the Twin Towers. It won the award from the New York Port Authority in April of 2001 and officially took possession in late July of 2001. And it got very favorable terms. It got a 99-year lease on the Twin Towers and much other property, 3 other buildings and a mall of 400,000 square feet for a total of $3.2 billion for a 99-year lease. The Wall Street Journal and other papers estimated at the time that the lease should have been worth $8 billion. But then we factor in the obsolescence of the Twin Towers, the amounts needed for their repair, and wonder why anyone would take them at any terms. Perhaps they were taken only because they knew